The clock on the dashboard read 2:13 a.m. when I crossed the skyway and the city behind me went dark, in a way that wasn't a blackout. It was something quieter than that. The lights were still on, most of them. The grid hadn't failed. But the shape of the skyline behind me looked wrong in the rear view, like a photograph of a city instead of a city. And I couldn't tell you then what the difference was. I only knew that my hands were shaking on the wheel, and I had not eaten in 9 hours. And the woman who'd called me from the Cook County morgue at 1:48 a.m. had used a word I was still trying to unhear. She had said moving. She had said it twice, and the second time her voice had cracked in the middle of the word, like she was hearing it come out of her own mouth and not believing it. Then she had said my name, Daniel. And then she had said, "Please come." And then the line had gone dead. Not cut, dead. The way a line goes when the building it's coming from has stopped existing as a building and become something else. I left my apartment in 11 minutes. I am 43 years old. I have been a paramedic in this city for 19 of those years, and I have learned to pack a bag fast. I want to tell you about the drive. I want to tell you what I saw and what I missed and what I knew at 2:13 a.m. that the rest of Chicago would not know until 4:30, when the first emergency broadcast cut through the FM band and the highways turned into what they turned into. But I need you to understand something first. I need you to understand that I left. I left, and Maya was still in the city. Maya is my sister. Was my sister. I keep correcting that tense and then uncorrecting it because I don't know yet. Sitting here in this room at the relay station outside Dwight with the generator coughing through its second tank of diesel, I don't know yet which tense is the right one. The radio says one thing. The thing in the bathroom on the second floor says another. I will get to the bathroom. I have to get to the bathroom eventually because that is where this story turns, but I am not ready to talk about it yet. And the rule of being a paramedic is you don't skip steps. You work the protocol. You don't let the patient die because you got ahead of yourself. So, the drive. I took 90 because 94 had been closed for construction since March, and I wasn't thinking. I was on autopilot. The way you drive when you've driven a route 10,000 times and your hands know the wheel better than your brain knows the road. The dashboard clock said 2:13. The temperature read 41 degrees, which was wrong for October, way too warm. And I remember thinking that was the strangest thing about the night, the warmth, before I understood that nothing about the night was going to be normal, and the temperature was the least of it. Traffic was light enough to be wrong, actually. Sunday into Monday, post-bar but pre-shift change. You should see a thin scatter of cars, delivery trucks, the ones who drink and the ones who work nights. I was seeing maybe one car every 2 minutes. That's not light traffic. That's empty traffic. That's the kind of empty that means something has already started somewhere, and people are inside, watching it, and haven't started to run yet because they don't know they should. The radio was the second thing. I had it on WBEZ, low, because I always do. And at 2:17, the broadcast cut out for about 4 seconds, and then came back on a different program. Not a different segment of the same program. A different program entirely. Like someone in the booth had pressed the wrong button or the satellite feed had stuttered, and they'd grabbed for any tape they had. The voice that came back was a woman reading what sounded like an emergency drill script. And she was halfway through a sentence when she came in. And the sentence was, "Do not approach individuals exhibiting." And then the broadcast cut again and went back to the music it had been playing before. And a man's voice came on after the song and apologized for the technical difficulty. I called Maya. I shouldn't have, because I was driving. But I called her. She didn't pick up. I left a voicemail. I said, "Hey, I'm heading down toward the morgue. Something weird's going on at work. Can you call me back?" I tried to keep my voice normal. I'm pretty sure I failed. The third thing was the smell. I didn't notice it until I came off the skyway and was passing through the southeast side, where the wind comes in off the lake, and you can sometimes smell the water if it's a clear night. The smell wasn't the lake. The smell was wrong. It was wet and thick, and underneath it was something like a hospital corridor at 4 a.m. after a long shift. That sweet, rotting smell of disinfectant fighting against something it isn't winning against. I rolled the window up. I rolled it back down because the smell was already in the car, and rolling the window up just sealed me in with it. I rolled it up again and turned on the recirculation. The smell faded but didn't leave. By 2:34 a.m., I was on Lake Shore heading toward the morgue, and I hit the first thing that made me actually slow down. There was a man standing in the middle of the southbound lane. Not walking, standing. He was in a bathrobe, no shoes, and he was facing north, away from me, looking at something I couldn't see because of the angle of the road. I came up on him at maybe 40 miles an hour, and I hit the brake hard and pulled around him. And as I went past, I looked. I had to look. And his face was fine. That's what I want you to understand. His face was a perfectly normal face. He was maybe 60, white hair, glasses. He looked like somebody's grandfather. He looked like he'd just come out of a house and forgotten where he was going. There was nothing on him. No blood, no injury, nothing. But his eyes tracked me. Not the way a person's eyes track a moving car. The way a camera tracks. Smooth, mechanical, end to end, all the way through my windshield and out the back. No blink, no micro-expression, just rotation. And his mouth was slightly open, and there was something dark on his lower lip, just a streak, like he'd bitten into a plum and not wiped his mouth. I drove past him. I drove past him because I had a sister to find, and a friend in a morgue, and a job that taught me to triage. And a man standing alone in a road in a bathrobe with no visible injury is a psych call, not a trauma call. And you don't stop on Lake Shore at 2:34 a.m. for psych calls when you're solo. That's the math. That's what I told myself. I was about a mile past him when I realized I'd never heard him. He hadn't called out. He hadn't moved. He hadn't even shifted his weight when my headlights hit him. I'm going to ask you something here, and I want you to actually answer it for yourself, in your head, before you keep listening. If you'd been driving past that man at 2:34 a.m. on an empty road, with the smell already in your car and the radio doing what the radio was doing, would you have stopped? Or would you have done what I did? I don't think there's a right answer. I just want to know which way you went, because I've had 2 years to think about it, and I still don't know which way was right. The morgue is on Harrison, and I made it there at 2:51. The parking lot was full. That was the first wrong thing, because the morgue lot is never full. Not at 3 in the morning, not ever. There were probably 40 cars, and 3 of them had their doors open, and 1 had its driver's side door open, and the dome light on, and a coffee cup spilled across the asphalt next to it, the coffee still steaming. I didn't get out of my car. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running, and I called the number that the woman, Renata, had called me from. It rang. It rang 9 times and went to a generic voicemail with no name on it. I called the main line. The main line rang twice and was picked up, and a man's voice said hello. And I said, "This is Daniel Voss. I'm a paramedic. I got a call from Renata Diaz about half an hour ago. Can you connect me?" And the man on the other end was quiet for a long second, and then he said, "Sir, there is no Renata Diaz on staff tonight." I knew Renata. I had known Renata for 11 years. She'd been on shift Sunday nights for at least the last 6. I told the man this. He said, "Sir, I'm telling you what I have on the schedule, and the schedule says there is no Renata Diaz on duty. And then he said something else. He said, "Sir, please don't come down here right now." And that was the part that scared me, because his voice changed when he said it. His voice had been bureaucratic, and now it was human. And the human under the bureaucracy was afraid. I asked him what was happening. He hung up. I sat in the lot for another 2 minutes. I watched the doors of the morgue. Nothing came out, and nothing went in. The coffee on the asphalt was still steaming. Then the lights inside the morgue went off, all of them at once, like someone had thrown the main breaker. And I put my car in reverse, and I left. I want to tell you that I drove home then, that I went to find Maya, that I did the thing the older brother is supposed to do. But I didn't. I called her again, and she didn't answer. And I texted her, and she didn't answer. And somewhere between the morgue parking lot and the on-ramp to 55 South, I made a calculation that I have replayed every single night since. The calculation was this: Maya lives in Lincoln Park. To get to Maya, I have to drive back through the city, north, against whatever is happening. To get out of the city, I have to drive south. And from south, I can call her, and she can drive out, and we can meet on the other side. The calculation made sense at 3:04 a.m. The calculation was logistical. The calculation was paramedic brain. The same brain that decides which patient to treat first when you've got 3 down at a scene. The calculation was wrong. And I think I knew it was wrong even as I was making it. I think I knew because I didn't say it out loud to anyone, even myself. I just turned the wheel south and kept driving. I-55 south out of Chicago at 3 a.m. is normally a ribbon of red taillights stretching toward Joliet. Semis hauling for the morning runs, the occasional drunk weaving between lanes. That night it was empty for the first 19 miles. 19 miles of nothing. Just my headlights and the dotted line and the smell still faintly in the car. Then around mile marker 254 I started seeing cars, but they were all going north. All of them. A steady, thin line of them, moving fast, headed back into the city. I couldn't figure out why. Then I realized what they were. They were people who'd been at the airport, or coming back from somewhere, who'd heard something on the radio that I hadn't heard yet, and were racing home to their families. I kept going south. I was racing away from mine. The first emergency broadcast hit at 4:31 a.m. I was south of Pontiac by then, in the long, flat dark of central Illinois. Fields on either side, no lights, just the road. The broadcast cut into the music station I'd switched to, and a male voice, official, calm, the voice they trained them to use, said the following: "This is an emergency broadcast for the Chicago metropolitan area. A serious public health incident has been reported in the city of Chicago. Residents are advised to remain indoors, lock all doors and windows, and do not approach any individual exhibiting unusual behavior. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." It played twice. Then the music came back. Then 5 minutes later, it played again. Then the music didn't come back, and a woman's voice came on instead. And her voice was not calm. Her voice was a woman reading off a sheet of paper that someone had handed her seconds before she'd opened her mouth. And she said the incident is believed to be biological in nature. Avoid all contact with affected individuals. Affected individuals may appear uninjured. Do not attempt to render aid. Do not attempt to render aid. I have been a paramedic for 19 years. I have rendered aid to a man whose face was caved in on the Dan Ryan. I have rendered aid to a child pulled out of the lake in February. I have rendered aid to a woman who shot herself in the kitchen and was still alive when I got there and kept asking me to call her son. I have never, in 19 years, heard a broadcast tell people not to render aid. I called Maya. She didn't pick up. I called her again. She didn't pick up. The third call she picked up, and her voice was a whisper. And she said, "Danny, where are you?" And I said, "I'm south of the city. Where are you?" And she said, "There's a man on my fire escape," and the line went dead. I pulled the car to the shoulder. I sat with the phone in my hand, and I tried to call her back, and the call wouldn't connect. I tried again. It wouldn't connect. The cell tower somewhere between us had either failed or been shut down or was overloaded. I don't know which. I will never know which. I stayed on that shoulder for 9 minutes. I am telling you the exact number because I looked at the clock when I pulled over, and I looked at it again when I pulled back onto the road. 9 minutes of trying to get the call to connect. 9 minutes of watching the eastbound headlights on the other side of the median, which had become a flood now. A bumper-to-bumper crawl of cars going north, cars going south, cars going wherever they were going. A real evacuation, the kind I had only seen on television. At 4:51, I made the second calculation that has haunted me since. I did not turn around. I did not turn the car north. I sat on that shoulder and I did the math. My sister is in an apartment 3 stories up in Lincoln Park. She has deadbolts on the door. She is smart. She will not open the door for the man on the fire escape. She will call the police. The police will come. And by the time I got back to the city, the roads would be a parking lot, and I would be stuck inside the thing that was happening and unable to help her or myself. Then I pulled back onto the road, and I kept driving south. I want to ask you something, and I'm aware of how this sounds. I want to ask you whether that was a real calculation or whether I was making the calculation because I needed permission to keep doing what I had already decided to do. Because here's the thing. A real calculation, an honest one, would have at least considered turning around. I never considered it. I told myself I considered it, but I didn't. The wheel never moved. My foot never came off the gas. I made up a reason for what I was already doing, and I have been making up reasons ever since. If you've ever made a decision like that, the kind that looks like a choice but isn't, the kind where you find the reasons after you know what I'm talking about. I think a lot of people made those decisions that night. I drove for another 40 minutes before I saw the relay station. The relay station was not in my plans because I did not have plans. I had been driving south on autopilot, no destination, just a way. And somewhere around mile marker 213, on a stretch of 55 with nothing on either side but soybean fields gone brown for the season, I saw the tower. It was off to the west, maybe half a mile from the highway. A steel latticed tower with a red aircraft warning light blinking at the top. And below it, a small concrete building with a chain-link fence around it. The building was lit. The gate was open. I don't know why I took the exit. I tell myself it was because I needed to call Maya, and the cell network was failing. And I knew enough about communications to know that a relay station might still have working landlines or radio equipment that didn't depend on the same towers. That's true. That was part of it. The other part was that I was 43 years old, and I'd been driving for almost 3 hours, and I needed to stop. And a lit building with an open gate looked like a place where I could stop and not be alone with the thing in the rear view. The exit was unmarked. The county road I took off the exit had no signs for the station. I just drove toward the red blinking light. The building was a 1-story concrete block painted a beige that the years had turned to a kind of sick yellow. There was a sign on the door that said, FCC licensed facility, authorized personnel only. The door was unlocked. The door was, in fact, open about 3 inches, like someone had walked out and not pulled it closed behind them. I pushed it the rest of the way open and called out, "Hello? Anyone here? My name is Daniel Voss. I'm a paramedic. I need to use a phone. No answer. The inside of the station was a single large room with a wall of equipment racks along the back. Old equipment. Some of it looked like it dated from the 70s. Big steel cabinets with analog dials and rotary switches, mixed in with newer rack-mounted gear with blinking LEDs. There was a small office to the left, separated by a half wall. A coffee maker on a counter, half frying some full, the burner still on. A jacket on the back of a chair, a book open and face down on a desk. The book was a paperback of The Stand. I want to laugh about that now. I couldn't then. I went to the desk and picked up the landline phone. There was a dial tone, a real one. I dialed Maya's number. It rang 4 times and went to her voicemail, and her voice on the recording said, "Hi, this is Maya, please leave me a message." And I left a message I don't remember the words to. Just that I told her I loved her, and I told her where I was. The relay station off mile marker 213 on 55. And I told her if she could get out of the city to come south, come find me, I would wait. Then I sat down at the desk, and I looked at the equipment racks across the room, and I tried to figure out what kind of station this was. It wasn't a cell tower. The equipment was wrong for that. It looked more like an old emergency broadcast relay, the kind that boosts signals from one transmitter to another along a chain. There were 3 rack-mounted scanners running, and one of them was making noise. A low chatter of partial transmissions cycling through frequencies, fragments of voices and static and dead air. I sat and listened. Most of it was the local emergency services bands. A lot of dispatch traffic, urgent and overlapping. A lot of the same words. Officer needs assistance. Multiple subjects. Subject down. Subject not responding to verbal commands. Subject is biting. Subject is biting. I want to tell you that I sat there calmly and processed this. I didn't. I sat there and I listened to a man's voice, a Chicago police dispatcher, take a call from an officer in Englewood who was telling him that he had emptied his weapon into a woman and the woman was still walking toward him. And the dispatcher kept saying, "Officer, say again. Officer, say again." And the officer didn't say again. The officer just stopped transmitting. And then there was a long silence on that channel. And then a different voice came on and said the channel was closed. Just closed. Like a meeting had ended. I sat there for I don't know how long. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe less. The scanner kept cycling. The chatter kept coming. I drank some of the coffee from the half-full pot because I needed something to do with my hands. That's when I heard the second thing on the radio. It came in on a different scanner. Not the local emergency band. A different rack on a frequency I didn't recognize. And the voice was different. It was a man's voice. Calm, slow, repeating a string of numbers. 5 digits at a time with a pause between each set. The voice was American but flat. No regional accent, the kind of voice you hear on old shortwave number stations. It went 80491. Pause. 33722. Pause. 80491. Pause. 61114. And on like that. Numbers I had no way to read. I found a notepad on the desk and I started writing them down. I don't know why. Habit maybe. The same habit that makes a paramedic write down vitals even when there's no chance of a save. You document because that's what you do. You leave a record. The numbers cycled for about 11 minutes, and then the broadcast stopped. Just stopped. The frequency went silent. Then a different voice came on. This one was a woman. She didn't read numbers. She said one sentence in English, and her voice was tired, the way a person sounds when they have been awake for a very long time and have given up on hiding it. She said, "If anyone is hearing this, The relay points are going to be the only thing left. The relay points are going to be the only thing left. Please. That was it. The frequency went silent again. I waited for 10 more minutes for it to come back. It didn't. I sat at that desk, and I wrote down what she'd said, word for word, on the same notepad. I was still sitting there when I heard the car pull up outside. I want to be honest about something. When I heard the engine, my first thought was Maya. My second thought was that it had taken me less than 3 minutes to think Maya, even though I knew it was impossible. She couldn't have driven from Lincoln Park to mile marker 213 in the time since I'd left the message, even if she'd left immediately, even if every road were open. I knew it was impossible, and I still got up from the desk and went to the door. And I think part of me still believed. It wasn't Maya. It was an old gray Buick, a sedan from the early 2000s. And the man who got out of it was maybe 60, gray hair, a heavy work coat. And he moved like he was hurt, but trying not to show it. He saw me at the door, and he raised both his hands, palms out, and he said, "Don't shoot. I'm not one of them." I told him I didn't have a gun. He laughed once, a short, ugly laugh. And he said, "Well, that's a problem, son, isn't it?" His name was Edgar Pohl. He was the FCC technician for this station and 3 others on this stretch of 55. He had been at his house in Pontiac when his pager had gone off at 3:30 a.m., telling him that the relay was running on backup power and that the primary feed from Chicago had failed. And he had driven out here to check on it. And on the way, he had heard the same broadcasts I had heard on his car radio. And he had not turned around because, he said, his job was the relay and the relay was here. I asked him what the station did. He looked at me for a long second, and then he said, "Son, this station is part of a network of about 40 of these scattered across the central United States. They were built in the late 70s and updated through the 90s. They are designed to keep emergency broadcast capability functional in the event of what the agency used to call a continuity of government scenario. If the cities go dark, these relays can carry signals between regional command points without needing satellite or commercial telecom infrastructure. Most people don't know they exist. Most of the time, they sit here doing nothing." Then he said, "But right now, they're doing something, and I want to know what." He went to the rack with the scanner that had played the numbers. He listened to the silent channel for a moment. Then he flipped a switch I hadn't noticed, and a different signal came up. A thin tone, steady, like a carrier wave. He said, "That's the handshake. That's the network checking that this node is still up. Someone, somewhere, is keeping this relay alive on purpose. And the only people who can do that are inside the network. Which means the network is still online. Which means whatever is happening, somebody up the chain is preparing for it to keep happening for a while." I asked him what the numbers meant. The 5-digit groups. He said he didn't know for sure, but he had an idea. He sat down at the desk and he pulled out a binder from a drawer I hadn't opened. The binder was a station logbook. The pages were lined, and most of them were filled with handwritten entries about routine maintenance, signal tests, equipment swaps, going back years. He flipped to the back of the book. There was a printed sheet there, laminated. Frequencies, codes, a list of the kind of broadcasts the relay was authorized to carry. He pointed to one line. It said Group, Connell Red, Successor. Format, numeric 5-digit groups. Activation, emergency directive only. He said, "Son, I have been a technician on this network for 26 years, and that line right there has never been activated in my lifetime. Not once, not even in drills. It was activated tonight. Edgar and I were at the relay station for the next 4 hours. The sun came up around 6:30, gray and watery. And somewhere around 7, the cars on 55 stopped passing. The highway went silent. From the door of the station, you could see a stretch of about a mile of road. And at 6:50, there were still cars going south. A thin, steady stream of them. And at 7:20, there weren't any at all. They had either all gotten where they were going, or the road had been closed somewhere up the line. We had no way to know which. We tried to find out. Edgar started working through the equipment, trying to bring up channels, listening for any signal that wasn't either the cycling numbers, which had started again at 6 and gone for another 40 minutes before stopping again, or the local emergency band, which had become almost unbearable. Police channels were dropping out one by one. Fire channels were silent. Hospital channels were a long, awful wash of overlapping voices, all of them giving the same kinds of reports. Patient bit me. Patient bit a colleague. Patient is restrained. Patient is no longer restrained. Patient is in the corridor. Around 8, we picked up a military channel. It came in clean and strong, like it was being broadcast from somewhere very close. And a man with the voice of an officer was reading what sounded like a containment status report. He said the perimeter on the south side of the city had been established along a line that he described in coordinates, and that the perimeter was holding, and that all civilian traffic on I-55, I-57, and I-65 south of the city was being interdicted at checkpoints. Interdicted. Edgar looked at me and didn't say anything. I knew what interdicted meant. It meant that they had closed the road. It meant if I had stayed on 55 another 20 miles, I would have hit a checkpoint. And the checkpoint would have decided what happened to me. It meant Maya, if she was still alive and trying to leave, would also hit a checkpoint. And the checkpoint would also decide what happened to her. This is the part where I need to ask you something. I'm asking because I genuinely want to know. If you'd been at that relay station, with what we knew at 8 in the morning, the numbers on the radio, the woman's voice asking for the relay points to hold, the military closing the highways, would you have stayed? Or would you have gotten in your car and tried to slip back north through the side roads before whatever was coming closed those too? Edgar said we should stay. He said his job was the relay, and the relay was here. He said the broadcasts were the closest thing we had to a window into what was happening. And if we left, we would be blind. He said the station had food, water, fuel for the generator, and a fortified building with a fence. He said the chances of either of us making it back to Chicago on the side roads, against the direction everyone else was running, were not chances he wanted to take. I said I needed to go find my sister. He looked at me with the kind of look you give a man who is making a decision that you understand and don't agree with, and are not going to argue against because you're not going to win. He said, "Son, I'll be honest with you. If your sister is in the city right now, she is in one of two situations, and the side roads aren't going to change which one. You can sit with me here, and we can keep listening. And if we hear her, or hear something about where she is, you can go from here. Or you can leave now and probably end up at a checkpoint and lose the option to go later." He was right, and I knew he was right, and I hated him for being right. I stayed. The next 40 hours at the relay station are mostly a blur to me now. We slept in shifts. Edgar took the cot in the back office, and I took a folding chair against the wall. And we kept the scanners running, and we wrote down everything we heard, and the notebook on the desk filled up with 5-digit groups and fragments of voices and a slowly forming map of what the country was doing. I am compressing this part because the audit of those 40 hours would be its own story. The short version is, by Tuesday night, 2 cities besides Chicago had been confirmed as containment zones. By Wednesday morning, the number was 4. By Wednesday afternoon, the broadcasts from the woman, the tired one, had stopped entirely, and the numbers were the only thing left. By Wednesday night, the official emergency broadcasts had also stopped, and the only voices on the network were the numbers and the carrier wave handshake, and occasional bursts of static that Edgar said might or might not be other relay points checking in. Then on Thursday morning, the bathroom thing happened. I had been ignoring the bathroom on the second floor since we got there, because we hadn't gone up to the second floor. The relay station was a one-story building, but there was a small staircase in the back of the equipment room that led up to a single second-story room, what Edgar called the catwalk room, where the original engineers had once monitored the tower itself. Nobody used it anymore. The door at the top of the stairs had been locked when we arrived, and Edgar didn't have a key, and we hadn't pushed on it, because there had been no reason to. On Thursday morning around 4 a.m., I was sitting at the desk listening to the scanner, and Edgar was on the cot, and I heard a sound from upstairs. A wet sound. Not loud, just there, like something had shifted on a tile floor. I went to the bottom of the staircase, and I listened. The sound came again, wetter this time, and under it, very faint, the sound of breathing. Slow, measured breathing. Not the kind of breathing a sleeping person makes. The kind of breathing a person makes when they are deliberately being quiet. I woke Edgar. I did it carefully. I put my hand on his shoulder, and I shook him slowly, and I put my finger to my lips when his eyes opened. He sat up and listened. I watched his face. His face went from sleep to confusion to a third thing, which was recognition, and the recognition was bad. He had heard this sound before, or he knew what this sound was. I could tell from the way his shoulders went down. He whispered, "When did you last go upstairs?" I said never. The door was locked. He got up very slowly and went to a steel cabinet in the office and unlocked it with a key from his keychain. Inside the cabinet was a shotgun, an old one, a Mossberg pump action, and a box of shells. He loaded it without looking. The way a man loads a weapon, he's loaded 1,000 times. Then he turned to me and he said, "The door isn't locked. The door has never been locked. That door doesn't have a lock." I felt something in my stomach drop a long way. He said, "The catwalk room used to be a bunk room. There was a key for it, but the lock was broken in 1994 and never replaced. I tried the door when we first came in. I always do. The door pushed open about an inch and stopped, like something was behind it, and I figured the latch was just sticky. I didn't push harder. I said, "What do you mean something was behind it?" He said, "I didn't think about it. I should have thought about it. I'm thinking about it now." We went up the stairs together, slowly. The wet sound came again, closer now. Not from behind the door, from behind us, from below us. I turned around and looked back down the stairs into the equipment room, and I saw what we had missed. The trap door in the floor of the equipment room, the one that led down to the cable trench where the lines from the tower came in, was open, about 6 inches, just enough to slide a hand through. I had walked past that trap door 40 times. So had Edgar. It had been closed every time. We had not opened it. Neither of us had opened it. The breathing was coming from down there. Edgar moved past me very slowly back down the stairs, the shotgun raised. I followed him because I didn't know what else to do. He went to the trap door. He stood over it. He looked at me, and he held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1, and he kicked the trap door open with his boot. The thing in the trench was a man. That's the most accurate word I have for it. He was a man, or had been one. and he was crouched in the cabled trench in the dark. And when the trap door banged open, he looked up at us, and his eyes did that tracking thing. The same thing the man on Lake Shore had done. That smooth mechanical rotation that did not look like a person looking. He was wearing a uniform shirt with an FCC patch on it. He was Renata's son, although I didn't know that yet. Didn't know that until later, when Edgar found his ID badge in the equipment room desk, in the drawer with the binder, where it had been the whole time. His name was Marco Diaz. He had been the previous technician at this relay station. He had transferred to the Chicago network office 2 years ago. He was the reason the door at the top of the stairs hadn't been locked. He was also the reason the relay station was still online. Edgar killed him with a shotgun. I am going to skip the details of this. I have skipped them in my own head every night since, and I am going to skip them now. Edgar killed him, and we closed the trap door. And Edgar sat on the floor of the equipment room for a long time and didn't say anything. And I went outside and threw up against the side of the building. And when I came back in, Edgar said, "Dan, he has been down there the whole time, since before we got here. He came here after the broadcast started. He came here because this is the relay. He came home." I said home. Edgar said, his mother used to work at the morgue in Chicago. Renata, did you know her? The bathroom thing, the actual bathroom thing, was upstairs. When we finally went up to the catwalk room, after we had dealt with what was downstairs, after we had spent half the morning not talking about it, and the other half boarding the trap door shut with planks Edgar found in a maintenance shed. We found the second-floor room, and the small bathroom attached to it, and the bathroom was where the rest of the answer was. There was a notebook on the floor of the bathroom. Handwritten. The handwriting was Marco Diaz's. We knew because his name was on the front. The notebook had been written over the course of the last 6 weeks, before any of this had started, before the broadcasts, before the night I left Chicago, before any of it. The notebook was a record of test broadcasts. Marco had been activating the Conelrad successor system for 6 weeks, running tests on it, sending out the numbers. Not as part of any official directive, he had been doing it on his own. He had been using the relay network to send some kind of coded signal. And the signal had been going out for 6 weeks, on a frequency that had not been used in 50 years, to a list of receiving points he had marked on a map in the back of the notebook. The receiving points were not in this country. I don't know what the signal was for. Edgar didn't know either. The notebook was procedural frequencies, times, equipment settings. But it didn't say what the signal contained or who Marco was sending it to. The last entry in the notebook was dated 4 days before my night drive south. The last entry was one sentence. It said, "They confirmed receipt. It is happening soon." I want you to hold that sentence in your head for a moment. I want you to hold it next to the man in the bathrobe on Lake Shore, next to the smell in my car, next to the woman on the radio asking the relay points to hold, next to Renata Diaz, who called me from a morgue at 1:48 a.m. and used the word moving and then went silent. Renata Diaz, whose son had been transmitting something from a cable trench in central Illinois for the 6 weeks before her city fell apart. I am not telling you that her son did it. I do not know what her son did. I do not know if the signal he was sending caused what happened in Chicago, or warned about what was about to happen in Chicago, or had nothing to do with what happened in Chicago and was something else entirely, some other piece of a thing I cannot see the shape of. I'm telling you what was in the notebook. I am telling you what Edgar and I found. I am also telling you that my sister called me from her apartment at 4:51 a.m. and said there was a man on her fire escape. And Marco Diaz was already dead in the trench by then. But the relay was still running. And someone, somewhere, was still keeping the network alive, and the numbers were still going out. Someone is still keeping the network alive. That's the part I don't know what to do with. It has been 2 years since the night I left Chicago, and I'm still at the relay station. I have not gone home. There is no home to go to in the way I'm using the word. The city is what it is. I have not been back since. The military line that Edgar and I heard on the radio Thursday morning held for 6 weeks, and then it didn't. And what came out of the city in those 6 weeks did what it did. And the country has spent the 2 years since trying to remember how to be a country. Edgar died last winter. His heart, not anything else. He was 64. We buried him in the field behind the station. I am alone here now. The relay still runs. The handshake still comes through twice a day. The numbers still cycle, although less frequently now, and on different frequencies. And I've stopped trying to figure out what they mean. The woman's voice, the tired one, came back on the air about 8 months after Edgar died, and she said the same sentence she had said the first time. If anyone is hearing this, the relay points are going to be the only thing left. I wrote it down again. It went into the notebook with the rest. I want to ask you the last question now, and I want you to think about it, because I've thought about it for 2 years, and I have not gotten any closer to an answer. When I left Chicago at 2:13 a.m., did I save my own life? Or did I lose my sister's? Was the calculation I made on the on-ramp to 55 a real one? Or was it just the shape of a man choosing himself? And if you'd been the one driving, if it had been your sister in Lincoln Park and your phone going to voicemail and your headlights pointing south, would you have turned the wheel? Or would you have done what I did? I think about Maya every day. I think about her last sentence. There's a man on my fire escape. I think about whether the man was the same kind of thing as the man in the bathrobe on Lake Shore. I think about whether her deadbolts held. I think about whether she got to the roof, or to the basement, or to the back stairs, or to anywhere at all. I think about whether she heard the emergency broadcast, and if she did, whether it helped her, or whether it just told her what she already knew. I have not been able to call her number for 2 years because the cell network in the Chicago zone has not come back. I tried for a long time. I don't try anymore. I don't try because I'm afraid that someday, if I do try, the call will connect, and someone or something will pick up. The last thing I want to tell you is about the broadcasts I have been making. I started about 4 months after Edgar died. I started because I was alone, and the silence was a thing I could not survive. I started by reading from the notebook, the 5-digit groups, the frequencies, the dates. I read them out on the same channel Marco used, on the same equipment, at the same times he used. I don't know if anyone is hearing them. I don't know if the receiving points he marked on the map are still there. I don't know if I'm continuing his work, or undoing it, or doing something else entirely that I do not understand. I just know that when I broadcast, the handshake on the network gets stronger. The carrier wave goes from a thin tone to a thicker one. Other relay points, somewhere out there, respond. The network knows I am here. I have been keeping the relay alive. That part is true. The woman on the radio said the relay points are going to be the only thing left, and she was right. And I am the relay point, and I am going to be the only thing left. And I do not know if that makes me the answer to her sentence, or the rest of the problem she was warning about. I am 45 years old. I am a paramedic who has not rendered aid in 2 years. I am the brother of a woman whose last words to me were about a man on her fire escape. I am the keeper of a notebook written by a man Edgar killed in a cable trench. I am the operator of a station that is still talking to a network that is still alive. Tonight at 2:13 a.m., the same time I left Chicago, the numbers are scheduled to start again. I will sit at this desk and I will read them out, the way I have read them out every night for the last 16 months. And I will not know what I'm saying, and I will not know who is listening. If you are listening, and I mean you, the one hearing this wherever you are, in your kitchen at 3 in the morning, or in your car on a drive you should not be making. I want you to know two things. The first is that the calculation you make, when you make it, will not feel like a calculation. It will feel like the wheel turning of its own accord. It will feel like the road choosing itself. You will tell yourself afterward that you considered the alternatives. You will be lying. There were no alternatives. There was only the version of you who turned the wheel, and the version who did not. And only one of those versions got to keep going. The second is that the relay points are going to be the only thing left. I know this because I'm one of them. I know this because the network is still answering. I know this because somewhere, on a frequency that has not been used in 50 years, someone is still listening for the numbers. And tonight, at 2:13 a.m., I am going to send them. If you are out there and you can hear this, I want you to do one thing for me. I want you to write down the time you heard it. I want you to remember where you were. I want you to know that the night Chicago fell, a man drove south at 2:13 a.m., and he made a choice, and the choice ended his sister and started him. And he is still here, sending numbers into the dark. 2 years later, in a concrete building under a red blinking light off mile marker 213, on a road nobody drives on anymore. If stories like this are your kind of thing, you know where to find me. I am on the relay. I am always on the relay. The dashboard clock in the car outside still says 2:13. The battery died years ago, and the time froze. I leave it that way on purpose. I sit in the car sometimes, in the afternoons, and I look at the clock, and I tell myself the same thing every time. You did not turn around. You did not turn around. You did not turn around. And then I go back inside, and I sit down at the desk, and I wait for the numbers to start.